What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. As you can tell from the title, I'm officially an instrument rated pilot. It feels so good to be able to get that out of the way. It's definitely one of the harder check rides you have to do going through the program, but I was able to get it done yesterday. I had a few hiccups though trying to do it. I had to get it rescheduled like 3 different times, twice due to weather and then once due to a DPE error. But other than that, it only delayed me like a week and a half, so it wasn't honestly too bad. The only thing that kind of sucked is having to get rescheduled with different DPEs, so having to learn each DPE's preferences. So one thing that I really like about ATP is that they use a lot of the same DPEs over and over again. So every time you get scheduled for a check ride, you get what's called a special emphasis packet, which basically goes into detail from a previous student that just took that check ride, the most latest one. Basically everything that they can remember from that check ride through the oral and the flight and how everything went. So it gives you really a good inside look on how the check ride went and how that DPE likes to do things, because each DPE is different and each DPE has different preferences. For example, my very first DPE that I was scheduled with was actually the same DPE that I took my private pilot check ride with, and I knew with that guy he was very, very strong on two things: weather and the sectional charts. So he goes really in depth with both of those, makes you read TAFs, METARs, makes you go through all the prog charts and different weather charts that there is, and makes you dissect everything on there pretty much. And then also he goes really heavily into the sectional chart and all the different symbols and altitudes and just everything that he can ask you a question on. And so preparing for that very first DPE I was scheduled for, that's what I focused on, was a few things like that, versus the DPE I ended up taking my check ride with honestly did not even, we didn't go over the sectional chart at all, and we barely even went into weather at all. He didn't make me read any METARs, any TAFs. The only thing we went over was like thunderstorms and things like that. It was just really, really brief. So it's really important to be able to know your DPE, know who you're going into with, and it's not like you're cheating or anything like that. It's just you're just being prepared for that DPE, because every DPE is different and you want to be as prepared as possible so you're not caught with anything unusual. And so if you can prepare specifically for a certain DPE, you want to do that. So it just gives you one leg up to be more prepared, to understand what he's going to be looking for and what he's going to be harping on. Because essentially all check rides are the same, but every DPE likes to do it their own way and has their own things that they specifically think are more important or that they'll go into more in depth. And so that's what I really like about ATP. And I'm not really sure how other flight schools do it. They probably do this as well. I'm not sure. I don't have any experience with any other flight schools, but I know with our flight school, we use a lot of the same DPE, so there's a lot of information on our DPE. So it was awesome that I was able to, like the day before, I talked to a student who had just had the same check ride with that same DPE, and I just went up to him and asked him. I was asking him different questions, like what are the got-you questions, what does he like to focus on, and I found out a few things the day before the check ride that I honestly wouldn't have known when the check ride came, and those few questions actually came up, and the only reason I knew how to answer them was because I had talked to the student before. So it's really important to get as much information you can on whatever DPE you're scheduled with. With that being said, I'm super excited to be able to do this video, simply because for both of my check rides I was all over YouTube watching like hours of videos, and I would just I would type into YouTube like mock instrument check ride or mock private pilot check ride, whatever one I was going for, and like because I have an hour drive from Orlando to Daytona, so I would just put that mock check ride on, because a lot of them were like an hour long, and I would just listen to it. And so it really helped me, especially for the private pilot check ride. There's so many videos on that. Mock oral check ride, just so much information on YouTube about that. So by the time I got into that check ride, I was really, really confident, really prepared, because I kind of knew what to expect, and it helped me a lot. And that's why I want to do this video, especially because when I was trying to find ones on instrument, specifically the instrument rating, there wasn't a whole lot of videos out there. So I'm hoping that this video can help other people going for the instrument rating to kind of get an idea of what to expect and what to see out of it. So obviously there's two parts of the check ride. There's the oral part and there's the flight part, and I plan on going over both of those in different segments and kind of just give you an inside look on how it went, how to handle that, how to prepare for it. So for me specifically, we started the oral, went over all the pretty much, I'm not going to go over the basic stuff like doing the paperwork and IDs and all that kind of stuff. Like if you're already a private pilot, you kind of know what to expect already. That's already part of it. But overall, my oral was like an hour long, and my DPM Pacific, he really didn't go too far in depth on things. He kind of brushed over the surface of a lot of things. The main thing he really focused on was just giving me situational questions, and so he'd give me a situation or scenario-based questions is really what he focused on, and how to handle scenarios, how to handle lost comms, and like I really have to apply everything I knew to based on that situation that he gave me. So I'd have to tell him step by step what I would do, how I would handle the situation. And so that's important to know, like, more than just the basics of everything. It's one thing to just have everything memorized and know like what the different acronyms are. Like, those are important, but you also need to know how to apply those more in depth. And then especially like with the private pilot, it wasn't as bad, but especially with instrument, there's just so many scenarios that can go wrong, so many things that can happen. So it's really important to know how to apply every measure that you have and all these different acronyms that you have to study. But I would say the biggest tool to use, and you can ask any student that's gone through this, is the My Pilots Cafe. This is what I used to help study along with a couple other resources, but My Pilots Cafe really goes through everything, goes through all the acronyms you need to know, the little things you need to know. And so right off the bat, he kind of started off with just a few small questions. You know, we went over the different acronyms, what you're going to expect during your clearance items like craft, so your clearance limit, your route, altitude, frequency, transponder code. We went over SIDs and ODPs. Which one you don't have to accept, and which one you can just follow. So ODP, obviously you can just fly without having to get assigned it. A SID, you have to be assigned it, but you don't have to fly. If you're assigned it, you don't have to fly. You can say no SID. So just know little things like that. Next, he asked me about holding patterns. So obviously know your speeds, know your holding limit times. So below 14,000 is 1 minute legs, above 14,000 is 1.5 minute legs. Then the speeds up to 6,200 knots, 230 knots, 265. So just know the different things like that. Know your acronyms for IFR altitude. So he definitely went over MOCA, ROCA, and MEA. Those are the big ones that he talked about. He liked to go over the RVR, so runway visual range. So know how to translate when you're given like when you're given 2,400 feet, know that's half a mile. Or if you're given 1,600 feet, that's 1/4 of a mile. So know your measurements, know how to go through those. Pretty basic, just went over it. He really didn't go in depth too hard in anything. He just kind of asked me and we went through. So these ones, I would say probably took like 10-20 minutes, and he would just breeze through everything because these are just items that he has to go through. So, knowing your mountainous areas, terrain, or your obstacle clearance in mountainous areas and your obstacle clearance in non-mountainous areas, 2,000 feet, 1,000 feet. You need to know your alternates. And all your information about the alternates, so know the 1-2-3 rule. So 1 hour before, 1 hour after ETA, ceilings have to be at least 2,000 and 3 session miles. So we need to know. So he basically put it like, when do you need to file an alternate? And the answer is you always need to file an alternate unless two situations exist. One is your airport of intended landing has instrument approaches, and then 2 is the 1-2-3 rule. So 1 hour before and 1 hour after ETA, ceilings are at least 2,000 and 3 session miles visibility. And then obviously you'll branch into, okay, well, what are the precision and non-precision requirements for having that approach? Obviously 600-foot ceilings, 2 session miles, 800-foot ceilings, 2 session miles. So just know that. He went over MEA, he went over your loss common procedures, so the 2 acronyms, MEA, AVEF. Just know how to talk about those, visual descent range, or visual descent point, VDP. Just know about that. He asked that on the approach play, so just knowing that that's used for non-precision approaches and know why it's there. He asked about, let's see what else. He asked about grab card. Obviously you know that. That's the equipment that is required for flying IFR or instrument during instrument flight rules. He also asked, when do you need an instrument flight plan? So make sure you know the different, I think there's like 5 or 6 different reasons why you need one. Flying in Class A airspace, you always need one. Flying in weather less than VFR, flying in special VFR 9, just know those different ones. So one of the big things that this DP in specific was big about was the flight plan. So he asked me everything about the flight plan, how to file one, where do you file it at, the different ways you can file it, how it's activated, how it's closed, and so you need to know how to do that at a towered airport, non-towered airport, because there's different ways to do it. You wanted to know who activates it and who closes it, and obviously that's ATC. And so just really know everything you can about that. He had me plan a flight before the Checkride ever happened from Daytona Beach to Palm Beach, Florida. So I had to fill out a whole nav log for that. I filled out the winds, the distances, the different points I had to go to, the fuel, how much fuel was going to burn through each segment of it, all the times, how long it was going to take, the estimated time en route, all of that. Then I also included in there my alternate. So I had my alternate already listed. I knew where I was going to be going, and I calculated out everything for that as well. So how long it's going to take from my destination to my alternate, the fuel is going to take to get there, which he liked. That was really good that I did that. But then he had me do something kind of unusual, and he had me file a paper flight plan, which I had never done before, because usually I always do it on ForeFlight. That's the way I'm always going to do it going forward. But for some reason, he wanted me to do it on a paper flight plan, which is kind of weird, but whatever, I did it. I just printed off a flight plan during the check ride, and I filled it out in front of him. And basically, it was literally just copying all the information I already had on my nav log, so it wasn't really hard. And then he just made a scenario where he was the flight service, so he had me figure out what the phone number was for the flight service, pretend like I was calling them, and then he had me basically told me to list out everything about the flight plan. And that was pretty simple, straightforward. And from that flight plan though, and the flight that he had me plan out, is where all these scenario questions came from. He also was big on PIREPs for whatever reason. He asked me like what the two different types of PIREPs were. Obviously you have the urgent, you have regular. He wanted to know what are all the items you need for a PIREP, and this is one of the questions that I wouldn't have even thought of doing beforehand, but I talked to a student the day before they taken the check ride, and he said he had printed out a paper form of a PIREP. So I did that for my check ride literally the morning of, and he happened to ask the question on it, so I just pulled it out. He looked over it and he said, okay, that's good enough. Had all the information listed on there that I would need to tell ATC or whoever I was talking to about the PIREP. He wanted to know when you'd have to report a urgent PIREP or when it'd be a normal one. Two other gotcha questions that he had for me were, one, he was big on LPV. He wanted to talk about LPV and APV. So, which I don't deal a whole lot with LPV just because we don't have WAS. LPV is strictly for WAS only, GPS, and we don't have WAS in our aircraft. We do have the G1000, but we use RAIM. So I knew what WAS was, I knew how to explain WAS was, and I did that for him, which he was impressed about. And I also had to talk about RAIM a lot as well. But specifically, he wanted to know what the standard minimums were for LPV, because obviously LPV is a non-precision approach, but it's the only non-precision approach that has a decision altitude. So it's a non-precision approach, but with precision minimums, essentially. And if I hadn't talked to somebody before this check ride about it, I wouldn't have known this either way. But thankfully I did, and I talked to this person, and it's actually found in the AIM. So a lot of the questions gotcha questions were all found in the AIM of the FAR AIM. And in there, if you look up LPV, it says standard minimums are 200 feet and a half statute mile visibility. So thankfully I knew that. The other one, the gotcha question that he brought up, was about circling minimums. So he wanted to know what is the guaranteed obstacle clearance when circling. And I had no idea what that was until someone mentioned that to me. So I looked it up, and it's actually in the AIM part of the FAR as well, and it guarantees 300 feet of obstacle clearance is what it was. And so those are just a few of the gotcha questions that he brought up. Thankfully, I talked to other people beforehand, so I knew what those were, and I knew that those were coming. But that was pretty straightforward. Then after that, we got into real heavy scenario-based questions. So he was really big about giving me scenarios based on the route that I planned from Daytona Beach to Palm Beach, and then he would pick a point and say, okay, you're at this point, here's your last instructions that you're given, and he'd say, now what? And so, or he'd give this situation that you just lost comms, you've tried everything, now what? And so I basically just have to walk him through everything. So I'd fly to the point of the airport, fly the back course for the ILS I would be flying, do the reversal, lose altitude, and then he would ask, when are you able to shoot the approach, or when should you? Obviously, he's referencing to the ETA time that you had listed. And so just be able to talk about scenarios, like be able to talk about whenever you lose lost comms, like what to do it specifically, like each step, be able to talk through it all. He was big about that. Then he was big about, even after all of that, you fly to your airport or your destination, and boom, you can't land. You have to go to your alternate. So he wanted me walking me through what's the process for doing that. Obviously, I have never actually had to do that or had to phone to an alternate, so I kind of just had an idea, and so I got caught up on a few things there. But he just wants me to think. That's really what he wanted me to do, is think through it, be able to apply what I know. And so one thing that I miss about flying to the alternate was he wanted me to say I'd want to check the weather first, or I'd want to check the ATIS first. see what the weather is there before asking ATC to fly me, or have ATC direct me to the alternate. Obviously, you don't want to fly to your alternate if the weather is terrible there as well. There's no point. It's just wasting fuel. And so it's something I hadn't thought about. I was kind of rushing through everything. So, but all in all, he was very fair. And if there was any points of the oral where I was kind of tripping up or I wasn't getting the answer, he kind of helped me lead me to the answer without giving me the answer, which was nice. He wasn't super hard on me about anything. And there was a few times where honestly I did not even, I really didn't know what he was trying to ask. He would just give me a situation, say all this stuff, and say, all right, now what? And I was like, I don't know. And so don't be afraid when you're on a check ride, just if you don't understand it, you don't understand what he's trying to ask, what he's trying to get out of it, just say, hey, I'm not really sure what you're trying to ask, or I'm not really sure what you're looking for, and just let him explain further. And there's no problem with asking that at all, and he'll definitely help you with that. But that was pretty much the oral. I'm sure I missed a few things that came up that I didn't mention, but that was most of it. Just know how to, because all these check rides and all these orals are moving to more scenario-based situations, so just know how to process that and convey that over to applying things and what you need to do. So after the oral got done, he said, all right, we passed the oral, we're done with that. And then he actually he walked me through everything that's going to happen in the flight, which was super nice. I just not having to worry about that when we got up in the plane. I'm like, what to worry about? So we went over everything and how it's going to go. And so he said, when you call up clearance, when we're on the ground, this is what you're going to ask for. And you're going to say it's a check ride and we need to get a couple approaches in for this. And so he gave me the approaches we're going to do. He told me we're going to first do a hold at Smyra, which is a point just south of Daytona, actually. So he said we're going to do a hold there. We're going to do one lap in the hold. Then we're going to join the arc, because right down to Smyra there's another point, which is the initial approach fix for Edemia arc that goes into an ILS approach for Daytona Beach. So we're going to go do the hold at Smyra. Then after the hold, and he thinks that I did it well, and he said we're going to call HC, have a vector as to the initial approach fix where we're going to start the DME arc. After that, we're going to get like halfway through it. He said if I'm satisfied, then we'll break off, give vectors to final. We'll do first we did the localizer 2-5 right at Daytona Beach. Then we're going to go missed. We're going to fly the RNAV 1-6 circle to 2-5 right. So now you have a non-precision approach, then you have a second non-precision approach that has a circling. Gets both those out of the way, and then the very last thing, after you do the RNAV, you're going to go miss, we're going to come back and we're going to do the ILS for 2-5 right again. So we briefed all of that, went over like any questions I had about it, then we get ready for the flight. So we go out, I'm pre-flighting the airplane, getting everything ready, and after I'm pre-flighting, I say, alright, we're good to go. He starts asking me a few questions, and he asked me about kind of random, but he asked me about the alternator, how it works, what would happen if, the alternator breaks off, and would your engine still work, how much battery life do you have left, which kind of went through that, and he was looking for, that the engine's still running by the magnetos, and so we just kind of went through all that. I got stumped on a few things, because I honestly haven't gone over most of that since private, but we kind of just talked all about that, and then he went around the aircraft and he asked me what every single antenna on the aircraft was. And for him that was important just because we're flying IFR. We're simulating flying an IFR flight or an instrument flight, and so you need to make sure everything is working properly. You have all those antennas, because if you don't, then that's going to cause a problem once you get up in the air, because you need those instruments to be able to fly different approaches. So he asked me, you have the two COM, you have COM 1, COM 2 on top of the fuselage, you have the ELT, you have the ADS-B or GPS, you have the marker beacon on the bottom, the transponder is the fin in the back. On the tail you have the two nav antennas, which control your VOR, your localizer as well. So just know what your antennas are, understand your aircraft, know all the different things. It's pretty straightforward. So after he's satisfied with all of that, we get going with the flight. We take off, we're departing the Class Charlie airspace, we're climbing out. And during the climb out, I think we're climbing to like 3,000, but during the climb out, he takes the controls, he had me put my fog goggles on, and then he goes right into unusual attitudes. So he just does really quick, 2 different unusual attitudes, really simple, and it wasn't even, they were honestly way easier than doing them in the private, because he wasn't super like diving with the airplane or anything like that. He just kind of pitched up, pitched down, and that was it. It wasn't a big deal. And then we got we were with departure, and they gave us my holding clearance. So what my holding instructions were for Smyra was he wanted me to hold north of Smyra on Victor 3, 3-mile legs and left-hand turns. So I was thinking originally I kind of did this wrong. I was thinking at first, okay, I'm going to hold north, so it's going to be an inbound heading of 180, and it's going to be an outbound heading of 360. And I briefed him on how we're going to do the hold. It turns out it was actually a direct entry, so it worked really well in my favor because I just had to fly a direct entry, which is super easy. I didn't have to do a teardrop or a parallel, so that worked in my favor very well. But when I briefed him and I told him the inbound and outbound links, he's like, "Are you sure about that?" And so I double checked, and I got it mixed up because if you're holding on a Victor Airway, then you want to hold on that radio of that Victor Airway, and it was from the Orman VOR. So the radio for that actually was 161 would have been the inbound leg, and then I think the outbound leg was like 341. So after I rebriefed him, he was satisfied with that. We entered the hold and made a call out that I'm establishing the hold. We did like half of a lap in the hold, and then he's like, "Okay, I'm satisfied. Let's go do call up ATC and let's get vectors to start the arc." So we got vectors, we got clear direct to the second fix, which is the initial approach fix for this instrument approach. We got on, started doing the arc, and thankfully, like, I have G1000 in our aircrafts, and so I just use GPS to follow the arc, which is super easy. Makes it really simple. Like, you literally just follow a line. We got like halfway through the arc. During that time, I was briefing. We were doing the localizer for a 25 right, so I was briefing the approach. After we're done, he's like, "Okay, I'm satisfied. Call ATC, let's get vectors for final approach fix into the localized 25 right." So we did that. We get vectors in. I fly the localizer 25 right. He gives me, and before this ever happened, before we started any of the approaches, I was given the climb out instructions, so my missed approach instructions, which we were training in Daytona Beach, so there is obviously the missed approach procedures for each approach, but since there's so much traffic, they obviously are not going to have us do that, which is really nice. So I didn't actually have to fly any missed approach procedures, published ones. So they just give me the instructions, fly runway heading, climb 2000, and contact departure. Super easy. So after we're flying the localizer, making all my call outs, we get down, we reach the MDA, and I say, "All right, I'm leveling off, we're at MDA." Whenever he was satisfied with that, he just told me, "All right, go missed." So we went missed, fly through the missed approach procedure that I was given by ATC, and then we got vectored around to do the RNAV 16, circle 25 right into Daytona Beach. We flew that, went really well. When we got so one thing that's important with the circling approaches is you have to know at what point do you circle and what is the altitude that you have to be at. So we leveled off at 600 feet, which was just above our MDA, and then right before 1.3, I was briefing them the entire time. One of the biggest tips I can give you on a Checkride is just talk. Like, make sure that your DPE knows everything that you're doing. Make sure you're briefing them on everything. So I was telling them way in advance at 1.3 is when we can circle, and when we get to 1.3, I'm going to tell you we're within circling minimums, and I'm waiting to go visual, because you cannot start your circle without taking the foggles off, or it is an automatic bust. So I told him that, briefed him that I'm not going to take them off until he tells me to, and he actually ended up doing it at like 1.5. He's like, "All right, take your foggles off, you can start your circle." So I took the foggles off, we got to 1.3, started my circle, made all the call outs. When we're coming in, he was looking for me to, during the circling, he was looking for me to be in position to make a normal descent, and to make the normal descent down to the runway on a 3-degree slope. Controlled, configured. He wanted me to configure flaps 20. That's what he was looking for. That's what I've trained for, so that's what I did. That was all fine, and about 200 feet above the runway, he's like, "All right, that's awesome, we did it." So we told me to go missed, so we went missed. So after we went missed, we got vectors back around to do the ILS 25 right into Daytona Beach. So that went well. We came around, we got to the final approach fix. Obviously at the final approach fix, you want to intercept the glide slope and beyond the localizer. And I was configured, everything was going great, switch over to tower, and then he failed my airspeed indicator, because you do have to have one simulated failure during the Checkride. Sometimes they do the attitude indicator. This DPE specifically did the airspeed indicator, so he just blocked it on there, said, "Oh, your airspeed indicator just failed," which is fine. So I just told him that I would call ATC, tell him, "Hey, I had airspeed indicator failure, and then I told him that I can use my PFD backup. And so he told me how you do that, so I showed him, and he's like, alright, we're going to assume both of those are down. So I went back, put the MFD back up, and then I just used my standby airspeed indicator for the rest of the flight. We got down, was calling out, 1,000 to go, 100 to go, everything was going great. Got down to the decision altitude, and I said decision altitude, and he's like, perfect, take foggers off, go visual, and we landed. And that was literally the flight. It was, honestly, I thought the flight was a lot easier than the oral portion itself, but man, it went great. I'm super happy. Studied hard, I worked hard for it, so it was a really good feeling to be able to get that done with. Hope you guys enjoy this video though. I hope that this video helps someone that is about to take their instrument check ride. I hope it gives them an inside look, and that someone else is able to get some use out of this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please leave a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you thought. Let me know whatever suggestions you have. Love hearing from you guys. Any input you guys have for these videos. And I'll see you in the next one.